Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in once again to the Churchboy Confessions podcast. I'm your host, Emmanuel Heke. Thank you for coming back. Thanks for coming back to this week. I'm a little jittery. I'm a little nervous because we got a guest today. So, I'm normally in my room by myself, but now I got a little audience, so I get a little nervous when I speak in front of people. But we're working on it. But today is going to be a really special episode because, like I said, we have a guest, and also this guest is someone who God has used to bless my life a lot. And transversely, I guess he's also used this man to really bless a lot of you guys because I've probably recorded, I think, 3 episodes now, inspired by the blog posts that this guy has created. And I'm just very excited to have him here. Before I introduce him, I just have to remind you all that the reason, for this episode and why this episode is also special is because we are doing our Men's Month. It's the first time that we've ever done Men's Month. And we're really dedicating this entire month to redefining manhood and reestablishing the definition of manhood based on the Bible, based on the Word of God. And I think that a really big thing that has been holding men down and holding men back and consequently holding this world back has been, of course, our sin, but a particular sin of pride. And you guys have listened to the episodes where I talked about pride. I rambled about pride. And most of it came from God using this blog post on desiring God. So it only made sense for when we're going to do another episode on pride in the context of manhood that I would have Mr. Jon Bloom join us. He is the author of the blog post, lay aside the weight of pride, lay aside the weight of low self-image. Those are the blog posts that I've actually had on this talked about on this podcast. But he's actually accumulated over 750 articles on desiring God. He is the co-founder of Desiring God, former executive director of Desiring God as well. Now he's a teacher. He is the husband of Pam. He has 5 adult children, and yeah, he's also the author of 4 books. So this guy's been very busy. The 4 books are Not by Sight, a fresh look of old stories of walking by faith. The second book is Things Not Seen. The 4th book is Don't Follow Your Heart. These are all 35 devotionals, books full of 35 devotionals to really help you get closer to God. And the last one he actually wrote very recently is True to His Word, which is 100 devotionals about God's faithfulness. Jon, thank you so much for coming on this show. It's a pleasure to have you.
It is a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thanks, Emmanuel.
No, thank you. Thank you. I am very excited for this conversation because, God has given you a lot of experience in this topic. And he's also given you a lot of wisdom on this topic. And I think it's going to be very impactful for everyone. So, yeah, Jon, I mean, maybe you can give us your background. I kind of gave him your bio, but maybe you can give us your background and what you want people to know about you before we get into the conversation.
Well, the first thing I would want them to know is that just because I've written on pride doesn't mean I don't battle it
Mm,
or that I'm, like have it mastered. So I'm not speaking to you and anybody else as some kind of a guru.
yeah.
Almost everything I write, just about, um, has more or less connections to me personally. I mean, they're coming out of my own wrestling, my own um, uh, fighting with sin. So
Yeah.
when it comes to pride, the pride of low self-esteem and the pride of high self-esteem. So which would be the the kind of the way pride manifests in strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
That's all coming out of my own experience.
Yeah.
And it's not just my own, it comes out of scripture and it comes out of a lot of observation that you accumulate over the years. But um but anyway, I'm just a fellow struggler. So,
Yeah.
we're here to mutually encourage each other's faith
Facts.
and help each other walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. And so that's the first thing I'd say.
Yeah.
Um the second thing I'd say is that my primary calling in life is as a husband and as a father. And so Pam and I have been married for 35 years, and so we've walked together, and that means she is a saint. She is the closest thing to a saint I know. I mean, in terms of the way we think of saints. She is remarkably patient and gracious. And so I've learned a lot about pride by watching her humility, watching her wise, humble responses to my sometimes foolish, prideful responses.
Yeah.
I've watched her be patient with our kids, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to become angry is something that characterizes Pam. And so she has been a great model for me in that area. Yeah, I've been with Desiring God for since it began almost 30 years ago. And aside from that, at different times I've been a worship leader in church, an elder, like a bivocational pastor, things like that. And so there's been various things the Lord has led me into and out of over the years.
Amen. Yeah, we gotta get Pam on the show too. Probably one of these days. She could talk about pride and everything.
yeah. Well, you might learn more from her than me.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, we're gonna get right into it, John. You know, I honestly am very curious for myself as to what really inspired, or if there was anything in particular, a season that you were in your life that really inspired you to write about pride in the first place. Could you recall that at all?
Well, I don't remember. I know that I wrote one of the articles you referred to in 2015, and another one in 2016. And I don't know when your job is to write. You're always cultivating ideas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so so you're drawing from various things. So sometimes they're front burner, sometimes they're just things that have accumulated, you've learned to delve into, to drive home. And so I don't remember if these particular articles were relating to something at the time. What I was doing, I remember there was over a few years, I wrote a number of lay aside the weight of life. And so I was working my way through it, and I was, whether or not any of them were front burner issues, they were all relevant issues because they're all things that I have been trying to learn to lay aside as weights and sins that encumber me.
Yeah.
And so the impetus for writing those articles was simply thinking through practically, pastorally, how have I learned, or sometimes what do I need to learn in order to practically practice the laying aside of those sins.
Right.
So that's really behind those particular articles. But like you're never rid of this pride part of you who just hangs on you like a monkey and can talk and just is always talking to you. It's this thing, it's this part of us, it's part of our fallen nature.
Absolutely.
And always trying to assert ourselves to either advance our desires or obstruct other people's desires.
Yeah.
If we see them as competing with our aims.
Yeah.
And so it's always there.
Yeah.
Something that we are called to die to daily. And so laying aside pride, in a sense, isn't something that's a once off, like you just master. You get these things, you get these principles. Hopefully what the articles that I wrote are things we can, to carry with us.
Yeah.
But it's a martial art. It's not like a formula. It's a martial art where you have to learn how to respond to pride's, the way pride is sort of trying to insert itself. How to block it, how to, And so it's a martial art that you have to learn by developing awareness of that inner drive to exalt yourself. And it's very canny. I mean, it's tricky.
Yeah.
It looks, because it just takes different forms
Yeah.
depending on what your circumstances. So sometimes you're asserting yourself in some kind of a controlling way,
Yeah.
and sometimes you're trying to pose as um, passive or amiable, but really what you're doing is you're trying to subtly manipulate somebody
Mm,
to your will. So it's a softer form. And other times it's kind of the self-flagellating, self-deprecating thing. I'm horrible, and that's part of the unholy lowliness
yeah.
that you've referred to
You
in
wrote
your.
about that one. Yeah.
So, but that's also this self-pity is often a manifestation of pride, at least, and for me, it usually is.
Yeah.
Usually, it's I'm such a loser,
Yeah.
and that's just pride manifesting itself through weakness, trying to elicit other people's sympathy,
Mm,
maybe manipulating them, or maybe excusing myself. It can be doing all kinds of different things. But
yeah.
so yeah, fighting pride is a martial art that we just have to learn how to become more adept at.
I love the way you put that. It was interesting because after I like God took me out of like, just doing the podcast on a weekly basis for about like 3 months, which is the longest break I've ever taken since I started it. And when I came back, like I felt so refreshed and renewed, and like I realized that God was bringing me out of, that prideful issue that I was dealing with. And when I had, put out all these episodes, I had a friend that actually reached out to me, and I thank God that she reached out to me. She knows who she is, and she just felt it on her spirit to tell me that, like, do understand that just because, God is delivering you out of it doesn't mean that you're not going to have those times and have those days where, like, you're going to feel like you're not making that progress because the pride really turned up a notch at that time. And ultimately, that the progress of our deliverance when it comes to our sanctification, when it comes to getting over sin, doesn't always look like a straight line up, right? Or it doesn't look like an immediate fix. Like you said, it's a martial art. I like the way you put it like that. But sometimes I see the progress as, it's gonna look like this, and by God's grace, we continue to go up, and that's the point until one day we're perfect, after resurrection and everything like that. But as for right now, there's gonna be times where it's great for us to make progress, but we have to consistently die daily, and we have to consistently understand that this is a enemy that's not just going to go away and never come back.
Right.
Is going to go away and maybe take a different form and come back in another way that might even not look recognizable with the
Yep.
previous way.
Yep.
And another thing that you said that I love was how that self-pity was the manifestation of pride for you, because that's the same how it was for me. We were talking about it, before we started recording, but really my testimony was that I was so crippled by the insecurities that I had. And I always knew that I had pride, but I never recognized the crippling insecurities that I had as pride until the way you put it in your article was that when we have such a high self-image of ourselves, yet the realities of our lives tell us that we are not that high self-image, that we're too slow, we're not smart enough, we're not this enough, we're not that enough, that the real anxiety and the real insecurity, and I'm paraphrasing what you're saying, but it exists in the chasm that exists between our high self-image and the reality that we experience from day to day. So my insecurities stemmed from me automatically. Like, I saw myself as such a high person, but like when I got rejected or when I failed at something or when I wasn't chosen for something, it weighed down on me more than it should have,
Yeah.
to the point where I so much devalued myself. And it's crazy because I wanted God to remove it. I wanted God, give me confidence, all that different stuff. But really, I should have been praying for humility the entire time. Like, to think that all of those feelings stemmed from my own sin, is just so crazy to me. I never saw sin to, at least, like, I recognize that sin could be hurtful to us, right? Like, like sexual immorality or something like that, or doing something bad that makes you go to prison. But pride is unhealthy for us in the way that it can make you think of yourself so lowly. And when you said when you wrote that like really, that was like a light bulb just went in my head, and I just thank God for it. But I wanted to ask you, what are the ways that you have seen, whether it's in your own life or in the life of people that you've taught or mentored, where pride would take shape and just become such a danger in their lives?
Um,
Or I'm sorry, let me ask that in particular, because I'm talking about pride, and pride is about everybody. But let's talk about that in particular to men, since it's Men's Month. I almost forgot.
yeah, no, no, it's a good question, and it's a broad question. You
Mm,
mentioned insecurities.
yeah.
Uh, Insecurity to me is like where pride runs amok in us.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of runs wild because you're you're trying to you're grabbing hold of something to give you a sense of confidence, or you get you're feeling
Yeah.
um, you're feeling sort of unmoored, and so um, it's like when you start to skid in a car and you're overcompensating in your turns.
Mm,
Um, that's what tends to happen in insecurity, and so we can usually spot people who are insecure by the way they are responding. They're either sort of over the top boastful
yeah.
about things, or confident, or they always gotta be sharing their opinions and showing you how much they know, those kind of things.
Yeah.
That's one way that insecurity is playing. We kind of feel it, like, hey, just relax.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but insecurity also makes us hide.
Yeah.
We're trying to cover up the from places that we feel exposed. We don't want to be exposed. We don't want to be ashamed.
Yeah.
Um, and so
Facts.
that sense of shame, we have this sense of shame, and we're trying to hide it. And the pride is the wanting to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I mean by that is when we just want to hide it from everybody. It doesn't mean that
Yeah.
it doesn't mean we got to air out all the you
Yeah.
know details to everybody. But when we don't want to tell anybody, um, then we know pride is at play, and when we're trying to present to everybody a certain face, a certain level of competence, a certain level of whatever, and we're hiding these areas of that we're ashamed of
Mm-hmm.
to one degree or another, our insecurities. So even when we feel like I should be further along, or I should be excelling more at what I'm doing, or people should, Lord, if you're blessing me, wouldn't you be blessing me with more listenership or readers or
Yeah.
whatever? Or a pastor might feel like, why can't I draw more people, or to hear my preaching, or
Yeah.
all those things. We as men know that we derive a sense of our self value, our the affirmation of our worth by the success in terms of how it's measured in the environment
Yeah.
around us, by the
Yeah.
peers that we respect.
Yeah.
And if we don't feel like we're measuring up, like you said, I think every guy understands what you mean when you say, like, I felt like I was up here, but I wasn't performing down here.
Yeah.
And and between here and here is that area of shame.
Mm,
You feel
yeah.
shitty. Like I'm not as much as I want to be and think I should be, and kind of think I am,
Yeah.
but I'm not acting like it.
Mm,
And so we're either trying to compensate for that, or we get
yeah.
angry or frustrated. It all comes out. But that's the area of insecurity.
Yeah.
It runs amok. It makes pride kind of go crazy because we're looking to either hide or project
Mm,
something that isn't accurate.
yeah.
You know, either not who we really are, truly are, or it's maybe who we want to be, and we want other people to see us as. So,
Yeah.
um, and then pride's like we're vulnerable then to pride's influence, really, really vulnerable. And
Absolutely.
humility then is coming to terms with who we are before God, and who we are before others, and um, receiving the grace that God has for people like us,
Yeah.
sinners like us, deficient, defective people, limited, um, and then also um, being as much as we can uh, honest with others. Just a level of frankness and honesty. Um, just being who we really are
Yeah.
as much as we can be with other people, and especially, of course, to those who are around us, um, and not trying to get them to enter the game of projecting publicly who you want others to think you are.
Yeah.
Don't tell them this, or don't, all those kind of things. So when we as men are just really vulnerable
Yeah.
to the use of pride to project or cover.
Okay. Um, I want to stay on that vulnerable piece because I think, yeah, vulnerable and manhood often don't go hand in hand, especially when we talk about the world's definition of manhood. But I think that even the world more like increasingly has become aware of how men need those spaces in order to be vulnerable and get things off their chest. And I think we can all, understand the importance of that. But with that comes the fear of what you're saying and how you're opening up to someone might backfire. Like, of course, there's a pride piece where like you don't want to be seen as this lower version of yourself according to your own definition. But then there's also the fear of, your business getting spread around, and now like, rather than working through your pride and trying to be vulnerable, now like, the entire world kind of is you're a victim, right? So I guess what I wanted to ask you is, do you have those people in your life that you are able to be vulnerable with, and how do you discern who to be vulnerable with in the first place, just so you're comfortable, and you can work your way through pride? And yeah, that's what I'll ask.
Um, well, the answer is yes, I do have people in my life with whom I can be vulnerable. Uh, my wife Pam is obviously, I shouldn't say obviously because that's not necessarily true with all married couples,
Mm,
but she happens to be for me, I would say, like the safest person that I know. So for me on planet Earth, she's the safest person. What meaning am I am me um, with her. you know,
yeah.
I'm not trying to be somebody that I'm not around her.
Mm,
And everybody needs people like that. And it's not that we, that like with other people we're hypocrites,
yeah.
but But with people that you don't know well, you're not going to just air everything out to, I mean, that there's wisdom there. We are to be as shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves, Jesus says.
Mm.
To know when and who and with whom to share things.
Yeah.
There's a discernment there, and then of course I've got men in my small group with whom I can be who I am and talk openly about various struggles, sins, and weaknesses, and as well as other things. Just I can share life with.
Yeah.
And then I've got some close friends who walked with me for years, decades. My older brother Jim would be one of those. So it's not like we're talking a lot, but there's this open communication. There's a sense of vulnerability because we're safe with each other. We love each other. We seek to strengthen each other. Now, how do you discern those people is not an easy thing to just define, because it's a discernment is, I don't want to overplay this martial art thing too much,
No,
but just this is this applying of wisdom to what you observe and making an appropriate judgment based on that. So you're observing people. I think key to finding people who you can be vulnerable with is being one of those people. Because when we become safe to somebody else, they tend to open up. Because what's required is trust. Right? So if you're going to have that kind of relationship with anybody else, there's got to be a sense of mutual trust. And in order to have the trust yourself to somebody else, it usually means you're proving yourself trustworthy to them. So being the kind of person who is safe to divulge to, who is very careful with other people's reputation, who is very slow to judge, listens carefully, doesn't offer quick fixes or but is willing to listen and sit with things for a while, and like, if you're that kind of person, you're going to find other people wanting to talk about what matters to them and what upsets them, or what they're grieving over, or what they're battling, the things they're struggling with. They're gonna, because everybody wants people to confide in, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, like, we all want that, and so we are looking for people. But if we begin by being that kind of a person, which means you share, you can just kind of tell almost as soon as you talk with somebody if there's a level of humility. You probably can think of some people that you met them for the first time and you start talking with them, and like immediately you knew, like you could talk to them. And that's an intuitive thing. It's not just, there's no exact how-tos to do that other than just being authentic and humbly authentic. Because if you are authentic and you're humble, you tend to be a safe person to talk to.
Yeah.
And so if you're marked by honesty love. You actually care for people. You care about what they're going through. You're asking them questions about
Yeah.
them, listening carefully to what they say, and you're not needing to impress them. So men especially, it's you know it's a competitive world, and we're used to competing. We're used to defending, and we're used to attacking. Um, in order to make our way in the world. But if you will authentically care for another person's soul because you care about their well-being, not it's not this competition. You don't see them as a threat or a tool or a way to get ahead or an asset or
Mm.
liability, but you see them as a soul,
Mm.
a soul that God has made and a soul that God cares for and therefore has inherent value, and you care for them. um, you will likely draw people with whom find yourself having people to whom you can talk to, um, because other authentic people and humble people are discerning that in you. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, absolutely. No, I'm very happy you said that too. No, thank you so much. Yeah, that was a beautiful answer. Um, yeah, yeah, we all need that person. We all need those people. Even a blessing if it's more than one person that we can be vulnerable with. Um, I guess I really want some people to come away with maybe not. Sometimes it's hard to have practical applications when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
talking about something that is really a transformation of the heart. Um, but what are some pieces of advice? I mean, this whole episode so has been pieces of advice, but we're talking to the man that really wants to be intentional about dying to himself, dying to the pride that he has each day. Um, what are some more practical or specific, maybe meditations or devotions or just ideas, things that he should do to make sure he's intentional about really inviting humility into his life?
Well, at the risk of sounding like I'm going to give a Sunday school answer, um, I would suggest paying close attention to Jesus,
Mm.
because because here is this paragon of godly masculinity.
Mm.
The more time you spend observing him in the Gospels, the more time you spend actually really listening carefully to what he says,
Mm.
the more I think I was talking about you can kind of see layers that begin to,
Yeah.
or to use a different metaphor, like this is deeper. There's depths here that you don't see. Um, you don't see it the first time you read it, or you don't see it at the phase of life. And I'll give you one example of how I'm drawing from a parable of Jesus, kind of
Okay.
having my mind blown by such a familiar parable, where I see a father's wisdom, in ways that I didn't see before. So it's the parable of the prodigal son,
Mm.
and I'm 58 years old, and so I'm now reading this parable at the age that possibly this father could have been back then. You know,
Right.
um, I don't know. We're not told. Jesus doesn't talk in that level of detail.
Mm.
But he's got two adult sons, and um, and there are things that now at this phase of life that I see that I didn't see before. That in which I see the humility and wisdom of the father. So in other words, we see that the young son comes and asks for his share of the inheritance, so he's going to go away,
Mm-hmm.
which he does, and the father probably knows that he's going to squander it, and he gives the son the inheritance. I don't know if that's ever struck you as odd, but if my son, I had asked myself the question: if my son came to me and asked for like his cut of the inheritance, my, things that I have worked years to accumulate, worked hard,
Yeah.
and I knew he was going to squander it, would I give it to him?
No.
I, I don't. I think my small group guys might rebuke me if I did. Like what
Yeah.
are you enabling? So the son knows that a certain amount of the inheritance is his. Typically, it's when after the father passes away, but the father gives it to him. So he goes and he squanders it, and but then the son comes back.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because he has just shamed his father. He has squandered his wealth. He brought shame on the name of that family, on the name of that father, in where back in that culture, which is different from ours, that was a massive transgression against another person.
Yeah.
Why did the son feel like he could come back in the first place?
Yeah.
I started asking myself that question.
Mm.
He knew the character of his father.
Yeah.
And as a father now myself, and feeling what I do in my heart toward my adult children, I understand the father's response of seeing this boy young man coming back home, and he runs down the road. And now the son has practiced this speech he's going to give. I'm not worthy to be your son. Just take me in as one of your servants. And I even hear that differently now than I used to when I was younger. When I was younger, I kind of heard that as, well, maybe I have a chance here at least to get a job, get something to eat. Maybe dad will just take me in as a slave. I now think I think he's expecting his father to be gracious because he knows his father.
Mm.
And I think his own shame may be as much behind the speech as, just hoping to have some place, just like I don't deserve to be your son. Like I don't.
Mm.
That's just like the shame of facing him.
Yeah.
I'd rather be your slave. And the father doesn't even let him finish the speech, and he puts his ring on him.
Yeah.
And a robe, his best robe, the robe of honor. And he throws this party, and and what is his father happy about? Now, if pride was controlling his father he'd have seen him coming down the road, gone back in the house, told one of his servants what to tell him.
Yeah.
And it would have gone a very, very different way.
Mm.
Why does that make this father humble? It's because the father cares about the soul of his son.
Mm.
That's what makes him rejoice. My son is no longer dead. He's come alive.
Yeah.
And that's what I care about. More than my wealth and more than my name, more than whatever, that you came home, you're coming home.
Yeah.
And of course, the older brother doesn't act that way. The older brother won't come in.
Yeah.
The older brother lets his father have it with what he thinks about that decision, because that older brother has various, manifestations of pride happening there.
Yeah.
One thing he doesn't care about is his younger brother's condition, his soul, and so that's just those are ways in which you begin to, the more you sit with it, the more you begin to see. And sometimes as you get older, you see different things. So anyway, this is a long rambling answer, and I'm sorry about that.
Nah, that's cool.
But the best, in order to know what practical ways can you use to kind of exercise humility, I would say, more opportunities to exercise humility are within our grasp than we want. And if you're an adult man, there's lots in your workplace and with your friend group and in your church, and you look at what you find yourself resisting wanting to do. If you really want to know where there's probably places to die to yourself, the problem is the pride in us wants it to be kind of heroic, sort of a stoic self-sacrifice of, because we can kind of be proud of that. That kind of looks good. The things that really humble you don't give you those kinds of strokes. They cost you in different ways. And it's the things that you intuitively, you just, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to listen to that person. I try to avoid that person because they bug me. I'm not going to work with kids, in the kids department. I'm not going to, what are you not gonna do? And ask yourselves why. Maybe there are good reasons, but there are numerous things in which that we find ourselves not wanting to do. It can be a very little thing. Like last night, my wife wanted to play Scrabble, and she always beats me, and I don't want to. I don't want to play.
I feel you on that one.
I don't want to play. I felt that resistance, and I went, I'm gonna play because it would make her happy.
Yeah.
It's not making me happy right now.
Yeah.
That's a little trivial thing, but that gives you a little illustration of like where do you find that resistance?
Yeah.
Those are often the opportunities to die to yourself in ways that aren't going to win you points.
Yeah.
They're going to just cause you to lay your life down in small ways and in larger ways. And so that would be one thing to do. And then watch how Jesus responds to people. Watch how he responds to people. He's unpredictable. You can't peg him down. Humility is not this sort of meek thing. Humility is a strength. Pride is a weakness that looks strong because it's selfish and manipulative.
Yeah.
Humility is a strength
that
looks meek. I mean, when it's true humility, it's a strength that looks meek and can come off, can look like you're weak, but it's not, because most guys don't have the guts to be humble. That's the thing. We don't have the courage. It takes courage if you're really going to be humble, to be who you really are, to not be who you aren't, to be willing to actually serve other people because you care about their souls and not because of what they can do for you or not because of, whatever. It's not going to get you strokes and you're not going to get public acclaim and you're not going to get likes on your social media, whatever. It's not going to earn you money. Like, that doesn't take courage to pursue those things. Yeah. It might take assertiveness. It might take initiative, creativity, organization, those kind of things that we like, leadership, these things that we say. but that doesn't necessarily take courage, but it does usually take courage
Mhm.
to be humble.
Yeah.
Humble enough to actually care about other souls more than yourself. To have this mind, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but made himself nothing and took the form of a servant.
Mhm.
Philippians chapter 2. So
Yeah, I was thinking about that the whole time.
that's courage. That is courage.
Yeah. No, amazing. Yeah, I love that. I love that answer. I was thinking about that the entire time. I love how, when you explain it, that when you're explaining it, it really tells me that, you know, pride is a self-centeredness, and the way to combat that pride is being able to focus on other people and focus on other
Yeah,
souls.
that's right.
And
That's
what
right.
I've actually realized how pride has held me back from being able to put somebody else first, or really just having more space in my head to think about somebody else beside myself. So I think that that is an amazing practical thing that we can do to combat pride. It's
Yeah.
legit care and think and concern ourselves
Yeah.
about someone else's soul rather than concerning ourselves about us all the time. Um, that's excellent. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I know. Like we're kind of at time, but I guess really the last thing I want to say is really just give you the space. If there's any other form of advice or something that you would say to a man, maybe even like let's be even particular, just like an unmarried man. I think that that like kind of is the majority of those that are listening. For us unmarried men navigating this life, wanting to be humble in a world full of that really just feeds, tells us, encourages us to feed our pride. Um, what are you gonna say to that person? Just like one 60-second blurb if you had the opportunity to sit them down.
I would say to a single man to look, um, when you're young. So oftentimes it's when you're, kind of in the phase of when you're single,
Mm-hmm.
or newly married. But there's this phase of sort of establishing your course, your career.
Mm.
It's a foundational phase, and then like you think so. Just think your 20s, kind of foundational. 30s, you're building,
Yeah.
like those kind of. So you're in your foundational phase. Um, that's a that's a call. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, it's not like being concerned about that and thinking about that is not wrong. It doesn't mean you're prideful. That's what that phase of life is for.
Mm-hmm.
But the way pride is going to get a hold of you is you're going to be obsessed with laying a foundation for making a name for yourself and make
Mm-hmm.
yourself a success. And you're going to look all over the place for opportunities to advance that. You kind of be, that's your lens.
Yeah.
That will tend to be your lens. Like, what is this going to get me? How is it? What's this? And you're going to need especially within your local church, your friendship group, and within your local church, um, develop the habit now of seeing others as souls and finding, like, what, not how can this ministry advance my goals
Yeah.
and my career, kind of help me, you know how can I get that to synergize and advance me. What what do the people around me need? What do they need? What does my church need? What's the need of this people? apart from what it does for me. What does it need? What do they need? How can I meet it? Jesus said, I did not come to be served, but to serve and to give my life a ransom for many. So I've gone over 60 seconds. I'm sorry, but it would be what do the people around me need? And habits that will serve you well, even should you become a husband and father someday. But you will always need it because you are going to be surrounded by people who need to be cared for and loved and served. And that's why God is giving you your gifts. It's not primarily to make a name for yourself. It's to be a means of grace and to somebody else, as well as receive from others grace. You're here to make a name for Jesus.
Yeah.
And by this will all people know that you are my disciples, by the way that you love one another.
Mm.
That's John 13:35, right? So that is the family resemblance. That's what your life is about.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's convicting. That one's convicting, John. That's actually very, very timely. Thank you for that.
Mm.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your time. Just being here, and yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. This conversation has told me about areas that I need to work on. And like you said, really what we're learning about combating pride is a martial art, right? It doesn't just go away forever. Even if it goes away for a season, it comes back in a new shape. And I really do hope that for all those that are listening, that all of these can be useful tools for you, useful information for you, just to continue to die daily. And wow, yeah, that is so funny that you said that last note though, because that's that's funny. That's a big one. That's a big one. I personally can admit that is something I need to work on. So yeah, John, thank you. I don't know if you kind of gave your last words, but I don't know if you had any last words just for everybody. But did you have any last words?
I don't think so. I probably rambled on enough. Your listeners are probably ready to.
They can pause it and come back whenever they want. That's how podcasts work. But that's fine. Once again, Jon Bloom, co-founder and now teacher and writer for Desiring God. Thank you so much for coming to Churchboy Confessions and just imparting the wisdom that God's given you on all of us. Hopefully this is not the last time we get to have you on this show. And for all of you that are listening, that are watching, thank you so much for tuning in once again. We're going to continue, talking about manhood. We're going to continue to redefine it throughout this month. And I appreciate you all for tuning in. And I'll see you guys next week. I love you guys. Have a great week. Peace.